Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. Second time today. Was supposed to be the third, but unfortunately, Anna and myself earlier on were having technical issues. So I think the best we're going to do there is probably pre-record our show and then I'll post it on because yeah, we seem to have issues with her and I connecting. I hope you guys all having a wonderful Friday or about to embark on a wonderful Friday and an amazing weekend. And to everybody in the chat, hello. Hello, Charmaine. Hello, Yelena. Nice to see everybody. And of course, Mr. Zagami, our favorite Italian sitting in the back. And we're going to be talking about, yeah, what's happening at the moment with the whole Epstein saga, Trump, what's happening with America right now. I mean, not just America, the world is in chaos, but hey, let's just enjoy this crazy ride all together, shall we? Without any further ado, Mr. Leo, how are you?
Always a pleasure to be on your show and always a pleasure to discuss such important topics. I must also thank my readers for a wonderful month as my book on Jeffrey Epstein has been very successful. It has been #1 in history of Judaism, in espionage, in various categories, biographies, and other categories of that section. And we can say that with this book, The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, I really sparked a lot of interest, especially in this moment, because with all this talk about who is behind Jeffrey Epstein, nobody really mentions the sect that helped his rise and fall. And so I think it was very timely, and I think that also your audience has helped us. It was the first show I went on discussing this new book. So I'm glad to be here again after a month.
Well, I'm so happy about that. And really, yes, I mean, I must say, I always absolutely give huge amount of credit because we have an amazing viewers. Our audience, really, you guys are top. So thank you for supporting our guests. And really, it's so important that we do that. So thank you, Leo. It's nice that that the viewers have done that. But I agree with you. It's like what I was saying, to me, Jeffrey Epstein is the face they've used almost as the diversion. I'm not saying Jeffrey Epstein wasn't a person, right? And a very nasty one at times as well, right? But I think they've used his face to turn him into, like, singularly, this monster. Now, I don't believe that he's the only one. And, that's been committing these horrific atrocities at all. And as you say, it's an entire system that has given rise to this Franken monster, right? And Epstein is just the face. He's just the one that has the little face. I mean, there's a brain, there's a spine, there's a leg, there's everything else, right? That goes along that makes up this monster. All we're doing is we're just seeing the face and being diverted by Epstein. And I think it again just shows how gullible we humans have been. We are so gullible, and how we've been brainwashed by the media. I mean, we just talk about the whole Operation Mockingbird, right? This whole media kind of programming that has got everyone just swept away believing a certain something, a certain narrative, but we're seeing something very, very different now. So yeah, I'd love to know what you have to say about that at the moment, Leo, because it's wow, it's wild out there right now, right?
Well, like I wrote in my latest book, even Donald J. Trump will not be able to really stop the influence and the manipulation games that are exercised by this very powerful elite, which of course is either loyal to the Sabbatean Frankists or the Jesuits. Now, my words can be deemed as controversial as you want, but the reality is that at the moment, President Donald J. Trump made a lot of promises, but those promises made were not promises kept, and there is a lot of disappointment. So aside from the Operation Mockingbird, what's going on in the news, I feel from the base, from the Republican / MAGA base that has brought Donald J. Trump once again to the White House, a lot of disappointment. And there is then an in-war going on. And this in-war is actually portrayed in a way that the media likes to portray it, because they're focusing maybe more on certain aspects than other. I mean, the truth is that if you promise a reduction in inflation, a reduction in the prices at the supermarket, a better life, a golden age, and you don't deliver that, regardless of Epstein files, which are of course of interest, but will not influence the daily life of the average American person. So there is, like I said, a lot of disappointment, because I think that for many decades, American politics was viewed by a lot of people, including the independents, the ones that don't really subscribe to one party or the other officially, but then give their vote based on the politics that are presented by the eventual candidate. But for decades, there was almost a feeling that whatever party you vote, you're never going to have anything changing. Suddenly, 10 years ago, when Trump presented himself as this maverick, as this very rich man who couldn't be bought because, he is a billionaire. So everybody thought, including myself, that could have been an incentive to have an independent view, an independent take on things. And let's say that in the first Trump presidency, we had some great results, some disappointments occasionally, but also some great results. So everybody was willing to give him another chance due to the fact that the Democrats were so disappointing. I mean, they were not only disappointing, they were literally driving the internet, the whole system in one direction. And if you dare to discuss something, you will be censored, you will be removed, you will be canceled. This gave a lot of grief and anger towards people who maybe wouldn't have even voted for Trump. But you see, at least with the second Trump presidency, at least we have the freedom to discuss anything here. I can mention now the vaccines, I can mention COVID-19, I can mention the elections. I will not be flagged as easy as it was during the Biden era. So that is something that I like, and I think it's part of this Trump presidency, which I like. The positive side, like the immigration, the fact that there is almost zero illegal immigrants passing here at the southern border. And this is a great achievement, especially for legal migrants like me, who had to go through years and years of a very complex process, which is a bureaucratic process, which is a process which also demands money, demands a lot of time. You have to demonstrate that you actually can produce something for this American society. Suddenly we had millions of illegals coming in and taking also money from us in a way, because they were granted things that not even an ordinary American would be granted. So this has been a positive side of things with Tom Homan, with the fact that they have gone after this illegal immigration. There is some aspects of it which might have been criticized in the last few months, because at times it seemed like they went after even the more innocent, the more, let's say, vulnerable But the problem is innocent or vulnerable. If you are not regularize your position for decades, then there is something wrong, because either you are not willing to work for the American dream and get a lawyer and finally get your green card or get your naturalization. I would say that what I notice here, at least locally where I live, is that a lot of the old Mexican gardeners and stuff are all gone, substituted by their kids who maybe are born here, and at that point they have automatically achieved an American citizenship, while maybe the old guys have gone back to their towns in Mexico where they can sincerely probably live a better life with that money they made. Because at the moment, also with this inflation, with this rising cost, the American dream has had some problems in manifesting for the ordinary folk. Today we have a Black Friday with all the discounts and all that, and so everybody's hoping that the things will turn around. But once again, when the price of meat, the price of this, the price of that, the price of milk, the price of the essentials have gone up so much and never gone down, and Trump has portrayed, together with his administration, a false, premise that things will be soon turned around in the benefit of the American people, but that has not yet materialized. Then you have members of his administration, like, for example, if you give the treasury to a guy who used to work for George Soros, who, like I explained, is a Sabbatean Frankist, the result is what we are getting. The actual guy might be promoting on TV, like other members of his administration have been promoting on TV certain things which have kind of divided the American public, which at the end of the day, it's not always a follower of a politician until the end. In other countries, Chantelle, in Europe, for example, it happens that you are born within a family that votes, for example, in Great Britain, Conservative or Labour. They will probably tend to continue voting for that party because of their, family background. The same in Italy. If you have voted on the left and your family comes from a region where they vote on the left, they carry on voting on the left, or they carry voting on the right. But in America, politics is driven also by a concrete result that needs to manifest. And of course, now Trump has some problems in manifesting this result. Then we had the killing of Charlie Kirk. Killing of Charlie Kirk, in a way, has functioned almost like a moment in which we see the fracturing of the MAGA movement. And now the fracturing of the MAGA movement, at least on the mainstream, is based on the premise that there is a part of the MAGA movement that doesn't want to give money to Israel, doesn't want to support Israel in any way, shape, or form. The other side instead wants to keep on that kind of a Christian Zionist idea. But I repeat, these kind of divisions have at the base something else. We have a post-Trump era, which is going to manifest soon, because from 2026, we basically enter the pre-electoral game of the next president, because you have the midterm elections here in America, which will decide the next Congress. And Trump not revealing the entirety of the Epstein files by his own will, he's been kind of an obstructionist towards it. And I know that for some people, this might, people defend Trump saying, oh, but in 2019, when he was, when basically Jeffrey Epstein ended up in jail, and then he was suicided, by the way, Trump was the president. And William Barr was the DOJ. But that's not a good thing. that's not necessarily a good thing that a guy ends up arrested and then gets suicided in jail. I mean, if you think that Trump has done justice by bringing somebody to jail and then the guy gets suicided, well, you have some serious problems, because, I mean, the number one priority should have been to protect that guy so we can know more about him, more about his network. But the people behind him were way too powerful. In my book, I explain the history of Jeffrey Epstein. Started with Donald Barr, the father of William Barr, the head of the DOJ, when Jeffrey Epstein was in jail and he was arrested. What does that mean? Donald Barr was a Sabbatean Frankist. He actually converted to the Catholic faith at a later age. Then we have this whole controversy surrounding, of course, Israel. Now, Israel is, like I explained in my book, the creation of the Sabbatean Frankists. These Jews who were pushed towards Israel by the European powers being Germany, being England, being even Russia, because there were the pogroms, we had the Holocaust. At one point, when Jews wanted to go to America, they couldn't go to America anymore. They will not let them embark to America anymore. And why is that? Because there was the interest to push them instead to colonize what is now called Israel. Is that a bad thing? A very bad thing indeed, because now you have, of course, Jews who have maybe been there in Israel, back to Israel for 2, 3, 4, 5 generations, who have the right to be there because they have been pushed there by a system that was corrupt. However, the way that Israel functions, I explain in my book, either labor Zionism or whatever you want to call it today, the Democratic Party of Israel, and on the other side you have Likud, which is a product of revisionist Zionism. Well, they are both the creation of the same elite that likes to create, one and the other. So I think that the problem here in America, especially, aside from the criticism towards Israel, which of course can be said, once we are sending money to Israel rather than to our own people here that require having some subsidiaries or some help in ordinary life, because the priority should have been America first. So America first, if we really have to interpret it in an honest way, and what really led me to become American in the first place, is not about intervening in foreign wars, not about intervening in the economy of other countries or even helping other countries. We don't care. First of all, we have to help ourselves. And that's what George Washington intended from the very beginning. He actually stated publicly that if we start mingling in the policies of other countries or in wars in other places that are not for the defense of America, we will be losing eventually. And so the warning was never really taken seriously. So I know that this, might sound to some people, oh, well, we are in a globalist world, everybody should help each other. That's bullshit, okay? I'm sorry, we don't work that way. Here, there is people who have made a choice. In 1776, they fought the English crown. Other people in other countries haven't done that. That's the truth. You stayed colonies. And now you might be an independent country like South Africa, but it's unfortunately not really working that well. So the thing is that here, blood was shed against the British. And that should be rewarded, and should not, we shouldn't find a way to ruin this country by flooding it with millions of Catholics who have no place here, because that is also their intention, writing not only the political landscape, but also the religious landscape of what used to be a prevalently Protestant nation flooding it with a bunch of Catholics just because the Jesuits and their NGOs want to do that. Talk about America first, but that is what is disappointing now the Americans, who see in Donald J. Trump a guy who is still spending billions. We had the moment of technological kind of mismatch here, and I'm not sure what that, but in any case, Trump now wants to start a war with Venezuela. Venezuela, protected by Russia, protected by China, is of course a proxy against both China and Russia. Somebody says Leo keeps freezing. Unfortunately, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
It seems like they don't want to let us talk about if, like many experts of the MAGA front said, if there is a war with Venezuela, like Rand Paul, for example, has stated lately, there would be a complete fracturing of the MAGA movement. So,
sure,
that is.
There's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, there is so much, to what you were saying there. I mean, I want to just maybe cycle back a little bit to what you were saying. Now, let's talk about the Epstein files, okay? Because that, I think, everyone that I know who's lost faith in Trump, it's been because of that. Now,
I mean,
there are so many.
Just sorry if I interrupt, but I mean, you're completely right. And also here in America, that is one of the reasons. But on the contrary, probably the supporters of Trump abroad, they really gave even more importance to that. We gave some importance to it, but of course, the Americans also are viewing the other things that Trump has promised and not delivered. And those concern the economy.
Yeah.
Those concern the tariffs that have maybe created even more inflation or even more rise of prices. Those are the problems for the ordinary American. For people who sustain Trump abroad, which at times was something that, of course, we deemed positive, but because, to have all this support for somebody who was supposed to fight the establishment in Washington, who so many times has mingled in foreign wars, foreign interests, foreign coups, and has created so many problems for people worldwide. I completely understand what you are saying, Chantelle.
I think it's just, what everyone is kind of thinking is that we understand the Epstein files is not just, I mean, it's not even whether Trump is in them or not, right? A lot of people say he's in them, whatever. It's not even whether he's in them or not is actually irrelevant if you look at the bigger picture, because it's not about Epstein. It's about everyone who was involved there. And when we're looking at the, Epstein Island, for example, we're understanding there's so much more that was actually going on there. Underground laboratories, all sorts of tests and things that survivors are talking about. The question, the thing is, it's like there were a number of survivors that were paid out literally millions of dollars. It's obviously reparation for being a victim of Epstein, and courts found them completely a legal process for them to receive the money. I mean, their cases were proven. So we're looking at this, and I think it's not it's a crime against humanity that doesn't concern only American people. It concerns the entire world. If we look at how many Epstein victims were trafficked, the ones that we know of, it's not just Americans, it's from the entire world. Everyone has an interest in what this is and who these pedos are that are sitting at the top of the game. And obviously, there's a lot to be said, and there's a lot of information that those files or books or videos or whatever it is. I mean, call it a file for a better, if you want a better expression. That I think is where the deception towards the greater public lies, is why are you lying to the greater public about that? We all know it's true. What we want is for these monsters to be brought to justice. That's the general feeling.
Yeah, and the general feeling, but the reality of it is that, like I explained from the introduction of this book onwards, there is a compromise that has been done, a compromise because Jeffrey Epstein is not simply a guy whose interest extended in the realm of sex, underage girls, or whatever kind of network. No, his influence actually was pushing so-called aggressive solution to geopolitical problems, particularly problems that pertain to America and Israel and their adversaries. Here we're not talking about a guy who's simply, handling a sex kind of sex ring or a human trafficking ring. And of course, there was the involvement of the Sabbatean Frankist with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was not the handler, but co-participant to the highest level. In fact, she's being protected now because she is actually somebody who, with her father, Robert Maxwell, was involved probably in this system even before Jeffrey Epstein ever came around, because she was born in it. Jeffrey Epstein was recruited. And then, of course, there is the whole, Les Wexner, this Jewish study group with Steven Spielberg, many other important people. But if we go and see this whole thing, Roy Cohn, for example, the gay mentor of Donald J. Trump, who died of AIDS in the second half of the 1990s, Roy Cohn was running a similar situation with underage girls, and before him there was another guy doing it. This is like simply a system which has been used for two purposes. One is, of course, blackmail, but there's also other purposes like the more occultic energies that they were kind of shaping up in the way of Eyes Wide Shut. If we want to, you can actually read an article I wrote on leozagami.com regarding this. But having said that, there is definitely a billionaire sex trafficker, but he was not only involved with that, he was involved with political power, with foreign policy. He had at some moments you can really see that he was so influential in both the politics of America as well as Israel. And when people say Israel controls America, well, Jeffrey Epstein was controlling both. So who was he working with? And that is really where the, let's say, more hidden occult network comes in. So I think that everybody that is watching now is disappointed towards Donald J. Trump, is disappointed towards what's happening in politics, because they almost voted Trump as the last possibility before a civil war, before a collapse of the system. And that now seems inevitable, because now it's like Trump has not delivered. People like even Joe Rogan or other important influencers of the MAGA world are starting to realize that and publicly criticize him for that. people will probably not go and vote anymore. That's the big problem also. So there is going to be like this disappointment is going to create a reaction. That reaction will be less involvement in the political spectrum. And then we're going to have, of course, those who take advantage of it as usual. And we're going to have probably even worse than Trump in the coming years. And then all this in the background of a AI robotics real change for mankind, which is epic and it's historic, and it will never be the same again how we develop our life when the AI and robotics will enter our homes with robots who are going to be sold also by South African Elon Musk soon for $20,000 here. But China is ready to flood the market. We are talking about robots, AI, and that is really the next thing. In fact, like I explained in my book, Jeffrey Epstein was involved also in that by being involved with hands-on robotics, with the development of Sophia the robot. So he knew exactly where this society was moving towards a techno-feudalism, in which you have, in 10 years from now, 80% of people, Chantelle, will not have a job. And you can
that's
say...
the intention, isn't it?
Yeah, but the intention and the alternative, Elon Musk said, well, you can grow your vegetables in the garden if you want. You can, work for fun. I mean, that is pretty shocking. And so this turning point that people are viewing now, it's a real turning point. And Trump, unfortunately, was in a way doomed from the start to fail against these people. And anybody who doesn't realize that, who has maybe overly characterized Trump as some kind of messenger of God or God's prophet on earth, well, guys, let me break it to you. I was a Trumpian from the very early stages because I was involved, actually, also with the establishment of Italians for Trump, close to his administration. I came here to America. I obtained the green card also thanks to the Republican Party. But here we are now in a situation that has changed, that has demonstrated that Trump doesn't care anymore about the common folk. And that is a big disappointment because, you are inviting all these rich and powerful in the White House, but you're not really delivering anything for those people who have been there in every single rally that you have done for years. Those rallies were very powerful.
What are you saying there? Are you actually saying that when you say he's now obviously he's made space for the rich and famous, or the rich and powerful rather? Now, from what I can see, that's the Zionists, the Israeli.
It's not only that. Zionists, right? We have the Saudi prince welcome with the red carpet. Anybody really, you say Zionist, but he has received even Mandani, the communist, anti-Zionist future mayor of New York, like he was some kind of superstar. So he doesn't really care what is your ideology. And that is also another thing that people really, and then people say, you're still Illuminati, blah, blah. No, I'm not still Illuminati here. I'm actually delivering the truth, even if the truth is not very comfortable truth, because I can be like some of my colleagues who suck up to still to Trump or to a specific political alliance of sorts, even in the left. And then you can be an independent thinker. You can be a realist, like, Chantelle, I've always been a realist. I wrote books that are not political. Yeah. They are actually bringing you the truth. Now, the truth, of course, once you have people who don't deliver their promises. And people will say, well, it was maybe naive of you to think that Trump would go against the military industrial complex. He didn't go against the big pharma when it was, when we had the vaccines. So what will make you think that he would go against the military industrial complex? Well, it was, like I said just a moment ago, maybe the last politician we wanted to believe in, because after this, there will already the polls are going down for J.D. Vance, who, by the way, is a creature of Peter Thiel and Palantir. Already we have, of course, other players that might be put there. Alex Soros, of course, Mandani, but also Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Politics is compromise. So this is a big problem in believing in politicians, in believing that you can still have maybe a solution through a politician. The truth, and this is something I've been saying for over 20 years now, in 2026 marks 20 years of Illuminati Confessions, when I opened my first blog, when then later on I published my first books in Japan, then Italy, then other countries in the world, and then America. I've not been doing this for 2, 3, or 4 or 10 years. I've been doing this for a very long time. So I denounced from the very start what was the intention of the New World Order, of the Illuminati, and this cost me a lot. I mean, people could say, "You're still an Illuminati." Yeah, but I haven't seen my son since 2008, idiots. Or say, "You are still a Freemason." Well, I'm not an active Freemason, because I've always been very open about my Masonic affiliations. I've been very open about even my, Illuminati ones. I wrote 12 volumes of my Confessions of an Illuminati to really explain what was happening and laying it out, I think, in a way that has created almost an encyclopedia for future reference. But having said that, now I want the truth to come out still, and I wanted this truth to be unbiased, to not be biased in any way, because I think that maybe in the past we had the illusion, like I stated with Trump, that things might change. Now this illusion is no longer there. Now the veil has been lifted. Now it's clear that, and Trump reminds me for many verses Berlusconi in Italy. In Italy, Silvio Berlusconi, you remember the late Silvio Berlusconi was like Trump, a guy who launched himself in politics after a very important career with the media, but also before that, also like Trump, building building capital through building entire parts of Milan, just like Trump did with New York. And then in the end, though, when I got involved directly with Berlusconi's political party, when I actually candidated myself, I saw it from the inside that he was compromised. And he was compromised, and from the moment he was compromised, especially by the Bilderberg Club, because that's in Europe a very powerful institution, he will no longer mention communism. He will no longer be prime minister. And he was given the choice by the establishment. You choose between keeping your TV stations and your business for your family, or you will be taking everything. And then, of course, he chose what he deemed to be more important, which was the business. So he was blackmailed with somebody called Ruby, who was a minor at the time. He was inviting minors for these rituals, which also were very much eyes wide shut by what was known as the Lodge of the Dragon in his own villa, one of his main villas. And so we continuously see this fixation with minors, power, and I think that today people see clearly this more than before, Chantelle. So I'm not though advocating and saying that we suddenly going to see the collapse of this system. Like for the last few years, every now and then I hear this, oh, the system is about to collapse, blah, 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 blah. We're going to have a brand new world. No, because the system is, like I explained, in charge of the banking system, in charge of your wallet, in charge of printing the money. So before that happens, everything has to collapse. And that means wide civil unrest, wars, and so on. That's why they know that is going to happen, and they want to avoid it by building an army of robots loyal to them, intensifying the role of the AI, taking out the humans out of the picture, and making them just enslaved by giving a universal basic income and telling them, well, just enjoy the rest of your life, and now you don't have to work anymore. We are in charge of things. It's called techno-feudalism. And what does it mean? It means like in the old feudal times, you had a castle, a prince, a duke, whatever, in charge of the castle. And then you had, of course, everything that rotated around this very powerful establishment that was hosted in the castle. And nowadays, of course, techno-feudalism is in charge like Peter Thiel of the AI, like Elon Musk, like Zuckerberg. And what does Peter Thiel promote? Facial recognition, the ultimate form of control. And we are supposed to think that this is going to change because suddenly Trump is going to see the light. I hope he sees the light and he really realizes that he needs to leave to the American people a positive legacy. But it seems like instead, just like Berlusconi, he puts in front the family and his family interest for the future, for the post-Trump era, in which, you're going to have an hotel there, and, crypto here and there, so making more and more money, but without giving anything to those people who, like me, really believed in him and who helped him out with rallies, with supporting him for years. It's a big disappointment, like I stated at the beginning of the show.
At what point did you, I'm going to ask you, like, was the turning point for you? I mean, where the, shall we say, the facade cracked? What was the moment? What was the incident that, for you, the facade cracked? Where you decided you changing your support or alliance? If
Okay. Let's say that it culminated in the last summer, what we have seen with the Epstein files. But that was the culmination of something that I started to perceive right from the inauguration. And for example, the inauguration was meant to be outside for everybody, for the common folk. I was also said I would be invited by his staff. That never happened. They promised me things they didn't deliver. Also at a personal level, for example, they were supposed to intervene on my behalf with the American ambassador in Italy for my problems with censorship over there, especially because I've been so vocal against censorship. Nothing. No hand was delivered. They promised me over and over again that I would be invited there at the inauguration. Nothing happened. And then they did the inauguration in a closed environment. You remember? With very few people in. It was a very rare moment because usually the inauguration is held outside. And that started to be a little bit weird for me. I was like, So then I wrote to the ambassador. These are things that I do behind the scenes that not necessarily everybody comes to know. I'm telling you for the first time here, Chantelle, because we are discussing this topic, and so I want to be very honest. I mean, I have been a politician, so I was one of the organizers here for 105,000 people coming to Coachella. We are talking about an active supporter, not somebody who is just like being a keyboard wizard or a lion of the keyboard, as they say in Italy. And people say, here, feels like listening to CNN. No, we are listening to the truth here about a guy who has been working hand in hand with that administration. I mean, I still to this day receive every single mail from the White House communication team. I'm actually recorded as a journalist in the White House, in the team that has the White House communication team. So, I mean, you're not talking with the average Joe who is giving his criticism. The White House actually listens to me sometimes when I talk. They follow my website. So it's been very hard for me to come out and say, this is not how it's supposed to be. But I have to be honest.
I believe you.
When at one point, Pambondi was like, there's nothing to see here. Let's move on with the Epstein files. That was actually, I already started to write this book. And I was like, giving me even more incentive, because I wanted to explain what is blackmailing Trump and the whole system in Washington. And to see people I admire, like Dan Bongino, deputy head of the FBI, who is kind of like, he used to be very vocal and suddenly he doesn't talk anymore. Kash Patel, who made a lot of promises about the Epstein files, like everybody else, never maintained. Repeat, the people who are following me know very well that what I'm saying is true, because it was like the motto was promises made, promises kept. Promises were made, promises were not kept. And that because I'm not a cult, a follower of a cult leader, I don't bow down to Trump as my God. If you don't deliver, I'm going to criticize you. I don't care who you are. So
yeah. I mean, look, I agree. We've got to hold the politicians, no matter what country. We have to hold people accountable. People have to be held accountable for the promises they make. People vote them in for that reason. And I mean, okay, we're all human and shit happens. You're not always going to be able to deliver everything as and when you've promised. But at the end of the day, there has to be some kind of a delivery schedule type of thing. I agree with that. I do agree that, there does. These guys need to be held accountable. And I'm not speaking about America specifically. Now I'm speaking about each and every government on this planet. Everybody needs to actually hold these politicians accountable for the things that they promise and never ever deliver on.
Honestly, it's never going to happen, because they know that the people are on their way to riot, on the way to rebel, and they are already preserving, they are already creating behind the scenes a way to defend themselves. That's why robotics and AI is, something for maintaining their global role as power players. Epstein used his connections to influence politics in the Middle East. He was using his connections even to maybe, give information to Russia on how to influence Trump and many other things. Now, these things are debatable. And people would say, oh, Zagami is this, Zagami is that. I repeat, Zagami is a guy who has fought. Maybe you have not, because I have not seen my son since 2008 because of this. My son is being raised by a member of the World Economic Forum, as I explain in volume 10 of my Confessions. That is something that I think the common folk has never had to face. Being arrested for espionage, suffering injustice, being tortured. And I don't, wish it on anybody, even my worst enemy. So there is people who are, of course, here on the internet famous because he's a famous influencer. He's a everybody's famous on the internet, but in reality, nobody has really sacrificed themselves. I had to change my actual citizenship. I'm no longer Italian. I'm American because I want to keep on doing my work. And I can say that still to this, still today in 2025, the American Constitution is the only constitution that permits a guy like Leo Zagami to write and do what he likes to do with the First Amendment. And of course, also permits him to defend himself with the Second Amendment. And, it's a country that if somebody comes through my door, I can actually shoot him. And that doesn't happen in other countries. So there is some understanding that maybe non-Americans have bit confused in their heads about certain aspects. But Jeffrey Epstein represents, for me, the collapse of Washington, D.C., and of all the compromises that have been made with both Big Pharma and the military-industrial complex. Who was the head of Pfizer? Wasn't it a guy, a Sabbatean Jewish guy, who went to the Pope a couple of times during the pandemic? And the Pope, Pope Francis, the late Pope Francis, instead of, giving more importance to God and the power of prayer, he gave more importance to science, obligating all the 900 inhabitants of the Vatican to take the vaccine. Yesterday, on Thanksgiving Day, the American Pope, instead of coming here to America to bless the American people, which will really need the blessing, he went to Turkey. Instead of eating a turkey, he went to Turkey. And the very first thing he did was to bow down to Ataturk's mausoleum. I explain in my new book who is Ataturk, a Freemason and a Sabbatean from the Dome community. So you are going down to, you leave the airport and go directly to the mausoleum like you are worshipping a saint or a god. And he doesn't go to the Hagia Sophia simply because he doesn't want to create controversy, because that is a church that became a mosque, that then became a museum, that then now became a mosque. It's not really, people need to realize that there is some evidence that is impossible to even debate or debunk in any way, shape, or form. When we have Alex Soros brought by Bill Clinton to Pope Francis after he was nominated the head of the Open Societies, well, do I need to add anything else? No. So it's not about Trump here. It's about Trump, who was and probably is in somehow involved with Epstein, and they have some dirt on him, but Epstein probably could hush up dirt on him, on his predecessor, who was showering with his little daughter, Joe Biden. Is that a normal thing to do? We have Barack Hussein Obama, who used to bring in his limo a guy called Sinclair to have him do oral sex and do cocaine in the car. We have before him George W. Bush, who used to bring male prostitutes to the White House. Before him, we have Bill Clinton, who transformed the Oval Office with Monica Lewinsky giving him a blowjob under the. So, guys, there is no president in the United States who we cannot who has an ethic and moral stand. Maybe the only one could have been Jimmy Carter, because the guy was one of the worst presidents, though. And so he demonstrated that maybe ethically and morally in his own family life, he was not criticized. They couldn't criticize him. But how comes he bowed down to everything for the system? And in the end, he became one of the worst presidents in American history. And if we go back then in the history of the people who supported Jeffrey Epstein, these are people who advised in every White House, new White House administration under every single president. So it's not about the left or right. It's not about the Republicans or Democrats. It's all a joke. And so Leo Zagami has decided at this point that we need to just ignore the Maya, the illusion, once again, of politics. And at this point, what is the solution to all this? Well, there is no peaceful solution because it doesn't go through democratic process. And it becomes very demanding for the normal folk to live without the influence of a government looming over his head. Yes, he might go to some remote place on the earth, but still, remember, you have thousands of satellites over your head at every given moment in time. So this planet is a prison planet. And those people who are owning the system, and they're not only the scientists, because it would be stupid to say, I mean, I know that you asserted that earlier, but the scientists, they're not the only ones living on this planet. You have the Chinese. And China is a very important power in this moment. People don't forget that the Sabatian Franklin family is like the Rothschild, for example, which is one of the protagonists of my book. They own 20% of the Bank of China. And then you have in other powers. You have Russia that has been, like I explain in my book, involved for a very long time with the Sabatian Francis reality, but also, of course, with other realities. It seems like people are in search of a solution, in search of a solution that comes from politics. Well, let me break it to you. That solution is not going to come from politics. and I think that you knew already.
Yeah, well, it never ever does, and I think you put it so aptly. The Maya, the word Maya means illusion, so we've got to break through the Maya, the illusion that something or someone is coming to save us, whether it's a politician, whether it's a church leader, whether it's your husband or wife, right? No one saves anyone. And that, to me, is really what this is about at the end of the day. And I think if God works in very mysterious ways, really, and God will always teach us most times through trickery, or, it's like if you're writing a exam, for example, they're going to ask you tricking questions where you've really got to think about it. You've got to go through the layers, right? Especially the more you understand how the spiritual realms work. So I think if the blessing that Trump is showing us now is that we should break through that illusion, that is a beautiful gift.
Yeah, no, I
he's
mean,
giving to humanity.
No, that is a great gift. Yeah, no, the fact that know,
even indirectly,
but, it's demonstrating that you might have great intentions, you might have promised a lot to people, but in the end you're limited in what you can deliver because you always have a gun at your head. Remember, otherwise you end up like John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Otherwise you end up like somebody who in the end is a zombie like Joe Biden, who basically could have, was not even in the White House most of the time because he was simply a guy who was a front for Obama, Soros, and all the elite that put him there, even in his very precarious health conditions, knowing very well that he was in those conditions. Now, what is happening here and this is food for meditation, let's say. Now, we had, for example, the day before yesterday, we had this terrible attack with two National Guard being attacked by a guy who, by the way, from Afghanistan, used to work for the CIA. I made a whole book, as you know, in CIA mind control and how they created the psychological operations, but also how they mind control people to actually do certain things. So this guy was part of a special unit called the Zero Units in Afghanistan. He suddenly goes and does something by leaving Washington State and going all the way to Washington to then shoot these soldiers who had just been, who basically just became soldiers 24 hours before formally. So it's very sad. At least the woman dies, and America is saddened by the whole thing. But what is the, creating the problem? What is the reaction? The reaction is more soldiers in the street to guarantee safety. Now everybody is stating Trump, is taking advantage of the whole thing. So maybe people should meditate about, was this really this CIA Afghanistan agent really operating independently, or had he been mind controlled to go and do something like that? Because it then benefits some.
Honestly, if we watch even like, I think the greatest TV series that shows us the best about or the most about these things, and even that is only a bit, is The Blacklist. Have you watched The Blacklist with what's his name? Oh my goodness, guys! Who's the actor in The Blacklist? That he's James, fantastic actor.
Oh, I have to check
it. Seriously, yeah, The Blacklist. It is brilliant, and it's really. I mean, he's kind of like this high-level criminal, but they give him off, or they like let him free because he knows everyone who's everyone, right? So they kind of use him as an informant. James Spader, thank you so much, Faith. James Spader, and I mean, honestly, I think for me, The Blacklist is one of the probably these series that has shown the most about what happens behind the scenes. And that, as I said, just on a surface level, because, who's getting taken out, who's the cabal, blah, blah, blah. And he's a brilliant actor, seriously, brilliant actor. But I think it's very interesting what you're saying. I think, the world is a changing place right now. It really, really is. We're seeing things, we're understanding things. And I know, obviously there's many different differing viewpoints in the, with the chats and the viewers and stuff like this as well. But, at the end of the day, Leo, I will maintain, and I've maintained from the very beginning, and I will maintain until the day I die, no one is coming to save us. We are sovereign beings, and we have to learn how to literally save ourselves. And that's what Jesus came here and showed us. He said, you can do what I can do plus more when you're in line with the Holy Spirit. And only when you're in line with the Holy Spirit are you able to truly discern truth from lies. We have been deceived over and over and over again. And I think it is time that we, for ourselves, discern. We've put politicians in power, and not just America. Yes, America is obviously prominent because it's a superpower. But, we also have to realize, and this again, and it has nothing to do with the people, but it has to do with the governments. How did America actually gain so much of its wealth? We've got to look at that, because when we're looking at the abuse of third world countries and the usurping of resources from third world countries, there's a lot there. And we have to be able to understand that so many of these superpowers didn't become superpowers through their own volition. They became that way because they conquered and they stole, basically. And that is, it's world politics. It's happened all over. We can't think it happens in one place and not the other. We can't think anything like that. We can talk about racism in South Africa and how the British colonized and who were the architects of apartheid and which tribe was here first. I mean, you have to know what's happening in this country. We hear it over and over and over in our ears a million times. As a white person, I'm constantly in danger just because of my skin color in this country, right? And it's also because of narratives that have been forced upon us. If you think about the reality of living in this country, most of us black and white people, we actually like each other. We get on well. We really cohabit amazingly well together. We have babies together. We have my granddaughter's mixed race. Okay, we hang out, we chill. Yes, there's a faction that is very, very political and very, very angry. Of course, that's happened all over in the world. And I think all of us have to sit back and recognize this. We are human beings, and we literally have been divided and played up against each other. We just look at how in my understanding, World War I, really, how much of these wars, and we understand why these wars are created. It's really about the 1% who decide they want money, who decide they want human loosh and blood sacrifices, which is why really at the end of the day, that's what happens. We are lied to around every corner about who killed who and who assassinated who. I mean, you look at these people. I mean, it's one big fat deceptive joke, actually. And all of us have to realize it doesn't matter what country we live in. And this is what I say to people all the time. It doesn't matter what country we live in. We are human beings. We've been lied to. We've been deceived. We've been used. We've been abused. We've been made a fools of by these creatures that think that we are too stupid to understand what's going on. Life is changing now. We're waking up. So let's stop fighting with each other and let's listen. I mean, Leo, I think you have some very valid points there. I'm not an American, okay? But I watch what happens from the outside looking in. And yes, there's a lot of cracks there from what I see, lots of them. And we can't deny that it's happening. We cannot deny it's happening. That's the reality of the matter. I know many people are disappointed.
It's always about creating the problem and then giving the solution. The cities have been led to this decline here in the United States, and then the solution is, of course, to militarize them because, some order needs to be put back into these cities. I mean, I see it here in my small city. We are quite lucky because it's small. We are also helped by the weather that becomes impossible to tolerate for homeless people in the summer because you literally die after 10 minutes. So it kind of like makes it more bearable. We don't have such an influx, though even here during the Biden era, every night we had shootings. Every night we had violence. We are close to the border, 1 hour and a quarter to Mexico. And I must admit that during the Biden era, we had some serious problems of security. And so that is a reality. In LA, of course, is unbearable. The city is in a complete state of mess. And every city under the Democrats is in a complete state of mess. So here it's not about being the guys from CNN saying, oh, Trump is evil and everything is fine with us. No, because it's a complete mess and there is no way that you can fix it with politics. And like you said, you should basically admit to yourself that there is a complete new direction to be taken if we want to maybe build a new kind of society. We need to dialogue with each other. We need to, of course, bring peace rather than conflict. But then you have, of course, then all the hypocrisy surrounding people like the Pope, who claims he's a messenger of peace of some kind, when in reality, the other day, they were doing in the Vatican a mass against Russia in support of Ukraine, and that is political, it's not religious. So now, you can promote yourself and go into the Middle East like the Pope is doing in this first trip abroad. But the reality is, like I stated for many years in my books, that they are simply preparing a one-world religion. So on top of the spiritual establishment, rather than a variety of religion, you can have a unified religion, because then everything is going, in any case, be driven and controlled by the AI, cyber Satan. So the solution might be to go outside of the cities, live off the grid in those nations that permit that. Because recently in Italy there was a whole confrontation with a small family in Abruzzo that decided to go and live simply with their children. He's from England, she's from Australia. They decided to live off the grid in this house, and suddenly they took away their kids, and now they are in a legal confrontation with the state, because the state wants them to vaccinate their kids and be subject to the rules that every state imposes. So it's not easy when the state thinks they own you, rather than you are simply born here or born there. It's like they seem to claim ownership over you, and at that point you realize that you're no longer a free man. I realized that in Europe, situation was much worse than here. Of course, here in America, we can still talk about it. In Europe, I will not be able to talk about these things, because after 10 minutes, I will have the police at my door, because they will break in like they did and lock me up for weeks on end. Torture me, inject me, do all kinds of things, accuse me of being crazy if I went against the official narrative. So I am glad to still be in a country that permits me to talk about, in this country I can talk about the president. Nothing happens to me. If I do that in Italy, after 10 minutes, I get the police at my door. So there is a complete, difference. And I'm glad that we are still this way, and I'm glad that the spirit of America is actually the spirit of independence, of sovereignty, of fighting for freedom that the common folk has all over the United States of America. Those many people who really believe that Washington has nothing to offer, and at this point are constructing their own realities. They have done it already in the past, but there was, like we stated earlier, the illusion that maybe with Trump things will change. Well, now that last possibility, it's not about a conflict within a political party, the Republican Party. We couldn't care less. Of course, it's going to be a conflict because there is elections, because if they see that Trump goes down in the polls, they themselves don't want to be connected to a loser. But the truth is that even if we elect anybody here, is through money, because unfortunately you need millions to candidate yourself in Congress. Me, Leo Zagami, I want to become a politician tomorrow morning here in America. I need 100 million. And who is going to give you the money? Well, it's going to be always Epstein's friends. And so if you don't agree with them, and you start saying, well, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, she rebelled to Trump, to the Republican Party. Now everybody's talking badly about her, saying that she was just taking advantage of the system until the 5th of January, so then she can take her money, whatever. But I mean, the woman has fought. The woman has fought, and the woman in the last few weeks, months, actually, since Trump has started to go against her, she received some serious threats. I mean, things that were at her home delivered and stuff that the husband and her were, the companion, I think it's the companion or the husband, I don't know, they were sincerely worried about how things were going. And the whole thing is here, and it has to be stated in a very honest way. If Trump and executive power wanted to release all the Epstein files, they have the power to do so. They don't need Congress. They don't need Congress. That was a charade. That was a show. That was theater, but it was also because at some point some Congress people got understood that this, this reaction from the president was abnormal, and they needed to pursue it. But they pursue it for political reasons. Now, we are still waiting for these files to be revealed, but they will always be redacted. That's why it's taking time, heavily redacted. We will never see the videos of this or this other important prime minister or businessman or whatever raping little girls, because that's not what they're going to show. Pam Bondi already said, that is pedopornography. We can't show it. Okay, fine. So that's it. They're going to get away with it. And the redaction includes, the classical putting black things on documents, and that's what they're doing now. That's why they're not delivering the documents still to us, because they're there marking this, marking that. Then in the end, they give us the document, and it's like black, 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 black.
Yeah.
And then there is 2 or 3 words. Oh, maybe they will mean something. Maybe they will mean nothing. Maybe we will have the possibility of identifying this or this other character. But do you really think they will go, like I explained at the beginning of the book, the only people who were ever sentenced criminally were Epstein, Jean-Luc Brunel, and Ghislaine Maxwell. And the first 2 ended up suicided in jail. Ghislaine Maxwell instead is worshipped and protected because she's still faithful to her own elite group of people who have protected her and helped her during the whole course of her life. And that includes also the link with the royal family, because you see, when you have the British royal family with the former Prince Andrew involved, but then you have a king who was the best friend of Jimmy Savile, the worst pedophile in history, who was even worse probably than Jeffrey Epstein. So I don't understand this whole, the king and Prince William get upset with Andrew. They should get upset with themselves. They should give up the whole power to another family like it happened in the past, because you don't need to inflict on the monarchy more and more pain. If you want to keep the monarchy, there is a solution. We don't always have the same house in charge of the same country. It wasn't always the Windsors, as they're called now, in charge. We had other people in charge before. So just make it, if you still like the system, which is the monarchy, change. Give it to another family. I don't find the family, the Windsors, they can really continue to be given any credibility.
I think, especially with the royals, we talk about Andrew. I mean, he really, again, he's just the fall guy for, so much more corruption and evil that goes on behind those palace walls. Exactly. I mean, when we speak to, there's a number of my survivors, Leo, that I've spoken to on this channel, have confirmed over and over that the upper royals are involved. as well. Definitely. I mean, Savile Charles and the brother of Savile, they were all. And I mean, I have it on really, really good authority that the child trafficking rings in South Africa and Africa was set up by Prince Philip because, of course, after the British colonized Africa, they will come here and use African people like absolute disgusting slaves. And that's what they've done. And they set up child trafficking rings here in South Africa. The main trafficking rings were set up here in the 70s, starting in the 70s, although they were before. And especially when the change of politics came, that was in the late 80s, early 90s, when the ANC took over. This country was ripe and innocent, and we had not had international exposure. We'd had sanctions against us for the longest time. We weren't allowed to travel. Many people weren't allowed to come here. We never had international singers and bands and things coming. It was a crazy time. So the royals, the British monarchy, are horrifically guilty for child trafficking in this country. When you're looking at the true people who are running this country, Johann Rupert runs this country. We all know that. Nicky Oppenheimer is the second in charge. We all know that. He's Cyril Ramaphosa's handler. And they all linked to the Rothschilds, right? The British.
Yeah, well,
British
I mean, like I explain in my book, Oppenheimer, Rothschild, and all the rest, they are all part of the Sabbatean banking cartel. And of course, diamonds and gold are of their primal interest because, that's how they develop their power. And it is the banking establishment that controls the world, the Sabbatean Frankist cartel. Yeah. So that is a very important thing that you said in regards to South Africa and who is really controlling the power in that country, who is not for sure a president who now, is being banned from next year G20 in Miami over the persecution and murder of white farmers, because, yes,
it serves them to push that narrative. Because, well, I mean, and also we must never... Carry on.
He is irresponsible, but he is a puppet in the hands of the people behind him. So, I mean, I understand that at the moment the South African leadership is guilty when you have a guy a Marxist who is calling for the genocide of the white people openly while he's running his campaign and all the rest. I mean, it's just incredible. This kind of scenario that we see in South Africa. I mean, it's unfortunately.
But isn't it interesting though when you're looking at, for example, Charlize Theron, who's from South Africa and now one of the more successful actresses in America.
It's completely woke, transgender.
Yeah. Yes, her money supports Malema, Julius Malema. She backs him. It's a well-known fact here that she's one of his big supporters. So we know, and I mean, Malema is handled by the British monarchy. Those are his handlers.
The economic freedom fighters.
Yes, they absolutely, and it serves them. We have to remember. Africa has been shrouded in the worst way, the whole of the African continent, because it serves as a grocery store to the rest of the world. The problem is that everyone else comes in here, rapes and pillages this country, takes our resources, and never reinvests. Why is South Africa or Africa the richest continent, yet the people are the poorest? Right? Why is that? That should never, ever happen. But then when we look at who's controlling things and how it's being controlled, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, I
South
mean, people
Africa,
like Julius Malema, if they ever went and controlled the whole nation by their own rule, they would simply be like North Korea. And North Korea is no democracy, but it's not even communism in the real sense. It's a group of people, an elite, the Kim Jong-un family, who controls the whole country while they live in their villas and prosper and live like, rich aristocrats. And the same actually happened also to some extent during the Soviet Union. It happens in China. So communism, what does it mean for these people? It means that you have to all obey to the rules of being the same and of course earning the same and all that BS, but at the same time the elite can continue striving and being rich and having big cars. Because do you think that Julius Malema doesn't have a big car, doesn't have a lot of money stashed and all the rest?
Of course not. That's the most hilarious thing. He wears a Rolex watch. He lives on a mansion on the hill, owns, I don't know, God knows how many houses, and yet he talks about African poverty. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, how are you even taken seriously? But unfortunately, the masses, and that's unfortunately how it works here, because the masses who are really subjected to the worst kind of poverty, their people have not changed anything for them. Unfortunately, if you speak to the older generation, African people here, a lot of them preferred the apartheid era. And that because there was service delivery, things were clean, things worked, everything. I mean, that's one thing the Nationalist Party did in this country. It was running like a very, very well-oiled machine, I'll tell you that much. And every time sanctions were imposed upon us, we found our own resources. Every time, and then we had our own oil, we have our own petrol, we have our own diamonds, we have our own gold, we have our own processing centers. I mean, we have everything here. We're incredibly resourceful, that's for sure, which is why everyone wants South Africa, actually. Why do you think all the African countries, you guys think you got border problems? Oh my God, Leo, you must see the lot coming over these borders every day. It's like a sea of faces illegally coming across these borders. And of course, it causes, and they all come to South Africa. Why? Because we are obviously the most modern, westernized. This country has been used as a guinea pig. We have exactly the same as you guys have there. So it's super modern. It's super everything, right? Ask anyone who's been here. We have everything you guys have. We are used as guinea pigs when there's chips being put in banking cards and all sorts of things. Hey, we're the first to get it because we are tried. I know we also prototype for seeing how black and white people live together and how much we can be actually divided and conquered merely by the color of our skin, which of course they did for years. And you're now seeing how that prototype is being taken to the rest of the world, actually. If you look at what happened here, it's happening in the rest of the world now as well. I'm going, oh my God. And the same thing with the power cuts and things. For a decade and more, we've had power cuts. We got so used to having load shedding. Now that's happening in the rest of Europe and America are having those issues. We don't have it anymore, yeah. We haven't had a power cut in maybe a year and a half now. I mean, it's insane. And of course, we look at our leaders and we see how everything is being manipulated. But we're also seeing the uprising in Africa at the moment. And I'm loving that. I have to tell you, I'm loving that. When we're looking at Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore, the leader there. However, what's very interesting, recently, he gave a contract to the Chinese to install surveillance systems. He's recently gotten rid of everyone, right? Everyone. The French, the Russians, the Chinese, the Americans, everyone. He's kicked
not
everyone
really
out.
Positive change when you go from
Exactly,
the
that's what I'm
Western
saying.
power to
I
China.
know.
It's like going from, I don't know, from the frying pan to the oven. It's just not really
My
happening.
point exactly.
So
My point
definitely,
exactly.
I'm glad that today we touch on these topics. I'm not saying that we have to generally be pessimistic about everything, but we have also to be realistic. So I hope that the people who watch this video understand that their intention is, first of all, to be realistic, to not make false assumptions or to promote the idea that we will be saved tomorrow morning suddenly by a savior of some kinds in the political world, but also in the religious world we have so many disappointments. I think that we have to hope that God will deliver something positive in the future and maintain His promises. At least if you are religious, you can hope for that, especially when we have the threat of cyber Satan so close to change humanity forever and enslave it even further in a condition where even our thoughts will be a problem, because today we have the freedom of thought in our head. Tomorrow we might not have that possibility. So, like I explained in my trilogy dedicated to cyber Satan. So, thank you so much for having me on. And we can say that maybe the MAGA system, the Make America Great movement will have a future maybe without Trump, but definitely without the two major parties that are here at work. I see in the future of the political establishment here in America a growing faction of independents. And I see with the growing disappointment in both the Democrats and the Republicans that happening probably not for the next presidential term, but for the successive one. So this new thing of the independence that come up and maybe, but until the system politically demands for a presidential campaign $1 billion or $1.5 billion like Kamala Harris used, that is not democracy, because who is going to give you that $1 billion wants it back? And that's what is eventually happening now in the White House. They will always give you the money, but then after they want something back. You have to be honest with that. And I myself know it personally, because I remember in the past I was offered on a silver plate millions, but if I compromises, that will be the end of my independence. So I live in modest conditions as a writer, but I'm glad to go to sleep every night knowing that I haven't compromised. Thank you so much, Chantelle, for having me on today.
And Leo, I want to just say I appreciate that. And I know I wanted to just actually mention earlier on, you mentioned about your son and everything that you haven't seen him since 2008. And that you've obviously, and I know you've spoken about that in the beginning. And I want to just point that out to our viewers as well. You know, guys, we forget these things. People like Leo, and I think because you've also been on the show for so long, we don't really talk about your past much anymore. So I don't think people always know that about you. Is that, as you were saying, your son is not with you. He's literally been taken away. You spent a lot of time in prison. You were tortured. You went through a lot of crap to get out of that system. So let's never forget that. There's a big price that people pay to speak.
Yeah.
And we might not always agree with what every whistleblower or every one of our people who are disclosing information like this are saying. But I have to say, Leo, I've got to take my hat off to you for actually standing up for what your truth and what your belief is now. And it's not easy to come in from a viewpoint where you've changed your perspective. It doesn't mean everything is now completely upside down and wayward and what have you, but you're seeing things and you have the courage to stand up and acknowledge that. I honor that. That tells me a lot about your character. Not that you lose any sleep over what I think, but I'm just saying, for me, that says a lot.
Thank you so much for
Right?
your kind words, Chantelle. I think that, with me at times, because of the way I present myself, people can have their own perspective until they really know the background, like you stated a moment ago. So I invite people who maybe don't know who I am to go and read my biography, study my work, and maybe in the end realize that it also came at a very high price. So thank you for pointing that out today.
Absolutely. If there's one thing we do know about our survivors on this channel, you guys have all paid a very steep price, and we honor you for that. Thank you.
Without really, people say how you did it is mainly because of God, because in those most difficult moments, I always gave myself really in the hands of God, and I said, let me go through this, and hopefully I will survive it to tell the tale after. And I saw it as a sacrifice that one has to do, but also as a trial, an initiation through life, that you get put in front of these important moments, this of great difficulty. Even coming here to America in 2019 with no certainty that I will obtain my citizenship, with nothing really at a professional level that would guarantee my life here, but I really wanted to do that, because otherwise the alternative would probably be dying in an Italian prison, a place where still I can't go back, even if I have my old mother and so many friends and family there. But that means a sacrifice. It means, standing your ground and believing in what you're saying, in what you are writing in your books, in your articles. And unfortunately, if I stayed there, I could have not continued my career, and like I said, I will probably end up dead. During the pandemic, Italy was one of the most oppressed countries in the world. People had to write on a piece of paper where they were going to show it to the police when they went out driving a car. I mean, it was this kind of North Korean approach that identified Italy during the pandemic. And the fact that now, today, in 2025, the majority of Italians, who, by the way, got also vaccinated, doesn't feel the injustice they went through. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, it's just like,
oh no.
They told at one point, I remember this scene in the center of Rome, the traffic police made people walk in one direction rather than the other, and they had to go through these things, and following the direction they would be direct. I mean, we're talking about walking. We're not talking about cars. I mean, I think that the people at that point demonstrated they are slaves, and they're willing slaves to a system. And very few people like us, Chantelle, have the courage to rebel and say, no, we had enough of all this.
Exactly.
Screw yourself. We're going to, challenge it. And unfortunately, at a cost. But still, if we are here, it means that we have been successful somehow. Take care, and God bless you all, guys.
And God bless you too. And thank you to you and your lovely wife. Yes, lots of comments in the chat about Christy as well.
I think that Christy by me for many years in difficulty, in moments, in which we were threatened and so on. That really means, a lot for me, because it means that she had the courage to really stand by her man, and it wasn't easy. When the police in Italy pointed the light and treated her like a criminal, interrogating her, and for many years she had nightmares about that, and the way that they had treated her when I was brought away from her in front of her eyes after breaking in through the door. I mean, these are things that normal people have never lived, and I hope for them they never live, because that means the system really closing down on you.
It's so true, because I think just the trauma, that those situations, the trauma of that happening, I don't think one ever forgets that. You know, I think that trauma is leaves such a PTSD imprint on you already, right? And it's so true what you say. And we are so grateful that and she is beautiful. You got very good taste in women. Well, in your wife, right? She is a beautiful wife, and I'm very happy that she has stuck with you through thick and thin. And that is what we need in this journey, people sticking together. We're all figuring it out together, guys. We are all figuring this out together. And this is why we have these conversations. This is why we can actually kind of sit here and talk about these things and relook at situations. This is what life is about. This is what the awakening is about for us all. Thank you, Leo. Really appreciate you. God
See you
bless
next
you.
month.
Take good care.
Yeah.
See you next month, indeed. Okay, awesome. Okay, guys, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys here. And yeah, appreciate you guys all being here. And I'll see you on the weekend for sure. We're busy this weekend, everybody. We're busy for the next few weeks. We're busy on this channel. Okay, guys. God bless you. Take good care. And yeah, have a beautiful weekend indeed. Mwah.